President, ladies and gentlemen, what a lovely pleasure it is for me to be with all of you in the beautiful city of Milan. I'm a big opera fan, so I have spent many a happy evening at La Scala down the road. So always a great excuse to be back in Milan. My name is Zainab Badawi, and I'm going to be moderating this session, which is called Catalyzing Private Sector Development in Asia and the Pacific region. And that, of course, is a very, very hot topic at the moment, because we all know that private investments and job creation are absolutely vital for sustainable and inclusive growth. And in our panel with my distinguished lineup, we're going to be discussing what kind of policies, innovative financing instruments, technical support and investments that are needed, that the MDBs need to mobilize and enable, so that we can really deliver prosperity for everyone, particularly for the member developing countries of the ADB, and of course they operate in more challenging situations. So we all know, we've all flown here by aeroplane. You can't be an aeroplane flying on one wing, only public sector-led development. You need the private sector in order to really be airborne. But before we start our panel, I'd like to invite to the stage who's going to make opening remarks on behalf of our host nation, Italy, Director General of the Treasury, Signor, or I should say, Dr. Riccardo Barbieri, who has spent many years in the Italian Treasury at the Ministry of Economy and Finance, where he was chief economist for a long time, but he also brings a whole bastion of knowledge of the private sector because he worked in banking, and he now has a very important role, of course, and you're very accustomed, sir, please come to the lectern, to representing Italy on the international stage. So please do give us your opening remarks. Thank you very much.
As you can see, when I arrived, I didn't have any white hair, but it was a few years ago. So anyway, thank you very much for this invitation. It's a great honor to be opening this important seminar with very distinguished panelists and the presence of Japan's finance minister. The private sector represents a cornerstone for sustainable growth, and its development is critical for building development paths and nurturing market economies across the world, and in particular in Asia and the Pacific. By supporting private sector investment, we not only generate economic opportunities, but also reduce reliance on traditional forms of official development assistance. Indeed, good governance and sound public policies are the backbone of successful market economies, and the contribution of multilateral development banks, MDBs, remains key in this respect. However, MDBs should also play a growing role in nurturing a successful private sector, not only by providing financial resources, but also by delivering technical expertise, innovative risk-sharing tools, and strategic guidance to transform ambitious projects into reality. Our excellent panel today includes the leaders of two European multilateral development banks, the European Investment Bank and the Council of Europe Bank, who will share their experiences in supporting private sector solutions and in collaborating with the Asian Development Bank. The European experience shows that one of the key avenues to spur the private sector is to design an effective institutional framework for pooling resources from the EU budget, in particular, to leverage MDB's lending capacity, partnering with other financial institutions as well as public and private investors. This makes it possible to support clients with investment grants, technical assistance, financial instruments such as debt, equity, and guarantees. Europe-based multilateral institutions have consistently supported infrastructure development and strategic projects in Asia by deploying financial instruments such as first loss guarantees, co-financing funds, public-private partnerships, in addition to advisory services and technical assistance. In recent years, European multilateral institutions have expanded their presence in Asia. We strongly encourage them to enhance their business across the continent and to deepen their collaboration with the ADB so that they can build on each other's strengths and achieve even greater impact. We already have several successful bilateral agreements and long-term cooperation frameworks between these European institutions and the ADB. More broadly, cooperation among MDBs is extremely important. And indeed, it's a key message that emerged from the G20 Capital Adequacy Framework review. The CAF review showed that through coordinated actions, whether via shared funding mechanisms or unified policy frameworks, we can maximize the impact of our investments. Data sharing is an important form of collaboration, enhancing quality, accessibility, and availability of disaggregated data on investment risks and performances across countries is also essential to support investment selection and planning. To this end, we look forward to MDBs building on the progress made on the so-called GEMS, Global Emerging Markets database implementation, to further expand the publication of such data. As shareholders, we are keen to see a strategic alignment among MDBs, not only to bridge investment gaps, but also to foster an environment where capital moves efficiently to productive and sustainable sectors. For example, in 2023, a Multilateral Development Bank's working group on sustainable public procurement was set up to actively induce and catalyze environmental, social, economic, and institutional sustainability. These types of collaborations have allowed us to share best practices, combine financial instruments, and enhance our collective risk management capacity. Despite significant efforts, of course, there are still challenges in fully harnessing the potential of the private sector, such as regulatory uncertainty, market risks, as well as lack of bankable project pipelines, just to name a few. MDBs are uniquely positioned to help overcome these challenges, including through dedicated country platforms. In closing, I would like to reiterate that Italy, alongside our European partners, remains deeply committed to nurturing a thriving private sector in the Asian Pacific region and forging stronger, more resilient ties through multilateral cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Director General Barbieri. And now we're going to have a keynote speech delivered by Katsunobu Kato, who is Japan's Minister of Finance. He has held many key roles in the ministry, including advisor to the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance, and indeed was a Vice Minister himself. And please do come to the stage. You've been in post since October last year, so I should imagine that it's quite an exciting time for you to be there. And we're very excited to hear about this newly established trust fund that you're going to tell us more about. Thank you.
Thank you for that interesting me. Prime Minister Eke and Deputy Prime Minister Dorji Hand and Director General Barbieri and President Kanda. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to deliver opening remarks at this important event. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to Director General Barbieri and Italian colleagues for hosting this year's annual meeting and for your warm hospitality. Asia and the Pacific region has demonstrated remarkable economic growth in the past few decades by reducing the poverty, building the human capital, and embracing the benefits of technological progress. Meanwhile, in order to maintain such momentum towards sustainable and inclusive development, the region needs to create more jobs spark innovation, and boost productivity. Private sector development is one of the critical elements for all these goals. Against the backdrop, ADB placed private sector development as one of its renewed 5 strategic focus areas in the context of its midterm review of Strategy 2030. ADB has set ambitious targets, including lifting the annual private sector financing from $6.8 billion last year to $13 billion by 2030. ADB can play the various roles in supporting private sector development from upstream to downstream. It can serve as an enabler to promote a business-friendly environment, a financing partner through the provision of its own resources, and the catalyst to mobilize the private capital. To accelerate such effort on private sector development, donors should also play a critical role. A joint effort by ADB and donors is essential for scaling up further investment activities. This is exactly the motivation why ADB decided to establishment a new multi-donor trust fund, ADB Market Acceleration Platform, or AMAP. AMAP will have 2 focus areas. First, it will help promote the business environment by providing the policy advice to strengthen regulations and institutions. Second, it will enhance banks' business outreach activities so as to bring more technology and knowledge in the bank's development project. Today, I would like to announce that Japan will contribute $20 million to AMAP. I encourage interested partners to participate in this initiative. At this critical juncture, I cannot emphasize more the importance of the collaboration. Let me conclude by once again emphasizing our high expectation for ADB to double down on its efforts to promote private sector development. In the region together, we can build prosperous, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable Asia and the Pacific. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Kato. Minister Kato, do stay on the stage. We're going to have a photograph. And of course, I should have said you're a former Minister of Health, Labour and Welfare, so you also have that side of your experience. Could I ask DG Barbieri to come back on the stage? And of course, all my panelists to come up because we're going to have a family photo. So please do come. Yes, take your badges off because I think the photographs look much smarter when you don't have your name badges. I'm going to just shift out of the way. So I think you'll go, where would you like them, photographer? In front of the tables or behind? Just behind the tables. There you go. Thank you. Hello. Hello, Prime Minister. Is it Eki? Thank you so much. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Didn't see you go to the photo. No, I'm fine. No, you go ahead. Come on. I'll stay on the edge. It's to keep you company, so you're not the solitary female. Right, there we go. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Minister Kato. Thank you. Thank you. So now, I think that I'm here, and President Kanda is coming back. Yes, is on my right. Governor Monticelli, you're there, and you are Yes, you're there. No, because I'm here.
No, perhaps no. Yeah,
I'm here.
yes.
Got it? Excellent. Good. We've got the lineup correct. So now, I just get my phone. So I'm the timekeeper. I'm the time police. So we now have about 40 minutes to have our discussion on catalyzing private sector development in Asia and the Pacific. I'm going to start with you, President Kanda. Masato Kanda, you've been in position since February this year as president of the Asian Development Bank. So it'd be good if you could just kick off for us about the current work of the bank and how it's informing your vision for this question of catalyzing private sector development in Asia and the Pacific. It's a big place, of course, many different countries with different histories. There may not be a one-size-fits-all, but what lessons can we say we've learned? Please, if you could set the scene for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Zainab. This is pretty relevant question. Indeed, private sector development has long been a priority for ADB, and I'd like to share some key lessons. What matters most is lasting impact. Our goal is to help developing member countries build sustainable, inclusive, market-based economies, and that means eventually operating without official development assistance. For private sector development, we know local context is important, but maybe this is...
Just one second, sir, because I think that people at the back, can you hear? No. So I just would like to wait, President Kanda, until we are certain. Can you hear me?
Can you hear?
You can hear me. Can you hear President Kanda now? Just try speaking a bit, sir.
Okay, sorry about inconvenience. So just I'll repeat very quickly. Private sector development has been a priority for ADB, and I'd like to share some key lessons. What matters most is lasting impact. Our goal is to help developing member countries build sustainable, inclusive, market-based economies, and that means eventually operating without ODA. For private sector development, we know local context is important. So now you catch up. So, but we have learned that support must be sustained, programmatic, and strategic. This is essential for achieving lasting impact, particularly for unlocking private capital at scale. One recent example of this is our end-to-end support in developing the renewable energy market in Uzbekistan. Our upstream work in providing budget support, shaping policy actions to restructure the power sector and helping to develop a master plan laid the foundation for a well-structured solar energy program for the country. Concurrently, we worked midstream through our PPP, transaction advisory services. We structured landmark deals and supported the implementation of a partial credit guarantee to address investor concerns about off-taker creditworthiness. From this pipeline, ADB financed downstream projects acting as a key development partner to catalyze private investments and demonstrate project viability. More than 3.5 gigawatts of new solar energy capacity is being rolled out in Uzbekistan with commercial financing. Many of these projects include battery storage to improve grid stability. More than $4 billion in power purchase agreements have been financed or awarded, including several with record low tariffs for electricity consumers. This market now attracts world-class developers. With the government partnership and our support, we have helped transform the sector by mobilizing and enabling significant private financing. Let me also highlight a lesson of being strategic in our private sector development work. Take our engagement in ASEAN capital markets. This is an area of high interest, and many partners have been delivering support. From 2016, ADB has been delivering a small technical assistance program to develop sustainable bond standards to support discussions with regulators to advise issues in ASEAN. That might seem modest or long ago, but this strategic intervention has laid the groundwork for thriving markets since then using those sustainable bond standards. ASEAN issuers have successfully raised more than $65 billion. 65 billion. We didn't mobilize all that private capital directly, but we helped build investor confidence and strengthen investment environment. The lesson is clear. Strategic, targeted support can enable far greater flows of domestic and institutional investment. Finally, I'd also like to mention the ADB Market Acceleration Platform Trust Fund you mentioned, AMAP, that Finance Minister Kato referenced a moment ago. We are very much grateful to Japan for being the inaugural partner. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, Japan is, with the 20 million it's pledged, but Minister Kato did say, everybody else, we've taken the lead here, but we want you also to start digging deep into your pockets.
Yes.
There you are. I've made the appeal for you again, you see.
Yes, everything welcome.
Yeah, everybody is welcome, yes. Money accepted from everybody. Thank you so much indeed for just setting the scene for us there. Let me turn to your neighbour there, Your Excellency, the Prime Minister of Tonga, Aisaki Valu Eke. You're also Minister of Finance. And again, you're a new boy on the block because you've only been Prime Minister appointed January this year. And Tonga is one of the borrowing countries of the region. And of course, you're about 100,000 people, I think, and you've got 171 islands, is that right?
Yes.
Are they all inhabited?
No, only about over 50% of it are actually inhabited.
Only 50%. Well, I'd love to visit because it's a very tourism-dependent economy, isn't it? And so I wonder if you could tell us what you've seen as the main challenges to boost private sector development from your perspective, and also what actions and reforms your government is implementing in order to provide that enabling environment, because you need two hands, don't you? The investment as well as the reforms.
No, thank you very much. In fact, we want to thank ADB, but the main challenges we have, in fact, we have been working along with ADB in trying to develop our regulatory framework, and for so many years now. And also, I have also tried to establish financial institutions in the intermediaries, and also private sector. But the main challenge we have, we have potential of economic growth and also become a viable economy. But the problem we really have is that is a limited financing actually available, basically with the banking system. And the cost of capital accessing this is quite prohibitive. And in fact, there was concern, and one of the BEFTEC organization, IMF fund organization in the Pacific, actually looking at it, that Tonga and also Pacific countries will be higher, 2 and 3% higher the cost of access than us. And basically because of that, the bank, as you know, they are risk averse to some extent, and also the criteria for access in addition to high cost of access. And also the other thing is the depth and the breadth of the financial system there is actually not there. And therefore, we need some sort of development of secondary market in terms of bonding market as a means of transmissions, actually to channel the resources at the concessional rate from the intermediaries across to the private sector. And that's also a main challenge we have at the moment. So the cost and also limited, and also we don't have a capital market so that actually people can buy shares in the business sector. So therefore, the financing is very much depending on debt financing. The other option of having shares or capital financing in terms of equity is very limited, and that is something, a market we don't have. Therefore, what sort of government trying to do in order to address the challenges? In fact, we're working with the Reserve Bank in Tonga. Very important, and monetary and fiscal policy have to be coordinated to address this one. And along with ADB to develop the bond market so that actually and to funnel the resources from the intermediaries across to the business sector at a more reasonable concessional sort of rate in interest rather than access directly. And also the opportunity for people to buy, invest in this kind of market. And that's what we are actually doing now in order to actually to reduce the cost of investment by investors into this. And very happy that ADB for the first time actually going to mobilize a local currency bond into the system, and that's actually working together there to develop that secondary market. And I think that's the way to go, to mobile resources there, because we have high liquidity, but a very high cost. So the only way to do is you have the kind of transmission medium in order to get our resources the kind of way.
I'm going to come to what you would want from the MDBs in the second round, as it were, but just in terms of the challenges that you face.
That has been a challenge for all of us for so many years, and not only specific to Tonga, but we have the meeting also shared by other Pacific member countries. That kind of huge liquidity, but the cost of access to expand our private sector is very prohibitive. And what means actually to solve this is one of the things. We also FDI. We have been trying to get FDI into the place in order to bring equity, but we haven't been successful. So that kind, even though we try to improve our environment, cost of doing business, but again, to us, that's immediate concern, and we try to provide solution together with the monetary policy.
Very interesting. So some very clear challenges for Pacific member countries such as yours. And of course, climate change is a massive, massive challenge for countries in your region. President Nadia Calvino, President of the European Investment Bank, you're an economist and a lawyer, and you've held many senior positions both at the European Union Commission as well as in your native Spain. You were until 2023 the Minister for Economy and Trade. So you've seen these from both sides of the fence, as it were, from the MDBs and also from government. So just listening to the challenges that the developing member countries have, particularly in the Pacific, just, what do you think the MDB's role in trying to enhance their impact on the ground can be? Just, what does it look like from your perspective, particularly in this current geopolitical context, which, as we all know, is changing for various reasons?
Well, thank you very much for the kind invitation. And many of you, of course, know, but many maybe don't, that the European Investment Bank is probably the largest multilateral development institution in the world with a 600 billion euro balance sheet. And everybody knows the EIB because we have a very strong role in investing and cooperating with the public sector. Be it when we are discussing rural development in Mongolia, when we're talking about water in Bangladesh or in Cambodia or Fiji, when we're talking about key infrastructures for small island states at the forefront of climate change, or when we're talking about metros in India or Vietnam. Everybody knows that, but maybe people don't know that 50% of our investments last year in Asia were actually focused on supporting the private sector. And I couldn't agree more with your description that we need the two wings for development to happen. And we have been very active through loans. You were talking about debt, also equity finance through international investment funds, also through guarantees, and through data, because having detailed information about the likelihood of default and the likelihood of taking losses is extremely important for mobilizing private investment in these countries. The GEMS initiative was already mentioned by Ricardo in his introductory remarks. I can say a bit more about that in the second round. But I think that as multilateral development institutions working together, we can really multiply the impact on the ground. Together we're stronger. And in today's geopolitical context, now speaking on behalf of Europe, and proud to speak on behalf of Europe, let me tell you, we will stay the course. We will continue to support the multilateral order that has served the world so well for the last 80 years. And we will continue to deepen our partnerships with countries, with multilateral institutions. We were just discussing before, deepening our mutual reliance agreements so that we can deliver more impact on the ground to the benefit of citizens and business as well, to the benefit of the world at large.
Thank you very much indeed for that very positive message and reminding us just how important the EIB is in this space. And in fact, Governor Carlo Monticelli, you are a former member of the board of the EIB. You're currently governor of the Council of Europe's Development Bank. And of course, all of you know the Council of Europe is not part of the European Union. I just thought it'd be handy to remind people that. But you've also worked for years in the Italian Treasury, and you've also been an academic economist and worked in the private sector. What haven't you done? What's important from this discussion's perspective is that you're also the current head of the your current chair of the heads of MDBs, about 10 multilateral development banks. And so you heard what President Calvino said there about the importance of working collectively. So I wonder if you could just touch on that in your opening remarks about the importance of working collectively in order to deliver the agenda that we're discussing. You know, what are the expectations from the major shareholders?
Thank you for your question. Thank you, Masato, for having me here, if you will, in this double capacity as a governor of the only multilateral development bank which has an exclusive focus on social investment, as a current chair of this group. And I might say a few words about this informal group that has been active now for quite a few years, but last year got particular traction because it has intensified its coordination and cooperation role following the call on the part of the G20 to have the MDBs working as a system and to respond to the roadmap that the major shareholders of the various institutions have set out to make multilateral development banks bigger, better, and more effective. Now, multilateral development banks have long understood that their catalytic role for private sector investment is crucial for development. And they do play this catalytic role, if I may say, with two kinds of avenues. The first one is just creating the kind of environment which is conducive to private sector investment. And this has to do with lobbying for better regulatory framework, having investment in infrastructure and human capital that make private sector investment more productive. And then there are a second avenue of cooperation that is both having specific technical initiative to play this catalytic role and then having co-financing and technical assistance in specific projects. Some of the most important systemic initiatives that we have taken have already been quoted. There is this GEM, which the private sector has really shown to appreciate. And it is a collective effort. President Calvino will say more, given that the EIB is hosting it, but I want to stress that it has really to be viewed as a collective effort. There is a joint effort, and indeed tomorrow there will be an event specifically devoted to it to develop local currency markets and to help private investor hedge local currency risk. And then we have a new development in methodology to just gauge the catalytic role to make it more effective.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Governor Monticelli. Very important. I always say capital is a coward, isn't it? And so it does need that very strong regulatory framework that you were so right to emphasize. Deputy Prime Minister, I'm going to invert your name because I understand that's the correct way of doing it. Deputy Prime Minister Doğukan Togmadin of Mongolia.
Thank you.
I've got this. This is how he prefers to have his name put out. Mongolia, amazing country. It's about more than 3 million people, isn't it? Landlocked, but you've got vast areas of untapped mineral wealth. And as President Calvino mentioned, you know, the rural development work that the EIB is doing with you, because I think it's something like nearly half of your population are actually nomadic, aren't they? But I wonder, I mean, you've only been in post again since July last year. A lot of new people on this panel today, but you've had a lot of experience in the Treasury in Mongolia, and you've also actually worked on projects with the Asian Development Bank. So it'd be interesting to hear what you think are the main challenges for you in Mongolia to trying to see this catalyzing of private sector development.
Well, thank you, Zina. So clearly it is like every emerging market, there are 3 major challenges, basically. One is very stable politics. The second one is basically the infrastructure, because the country like Mongolia has big land, you know, it's number 17 in the world. It's like half of India, while we have only 3.5 million people. So in order to bring all this government service to the rural area, you know, it's very costly. And connectivity, all the infrastructure project needs a lot of funding, right? So this is obviously it's one of the biggest challenges. The other one is, of course, the money, the funding. The funding is getting very expensive, you know. So everyone knows that what is going on in the world is the tariff is actually increasing, and it actually hit every single country, right? As a result, the money is getting very expensive. So just before coming here, I had a meeting in New York and had some private equity funds and pension funds and also some hedge funds, you know, talk about some project funding, but it is getting very expensive, and all the money is go to fixed asset rather than the private equity. That is the issue, and uncertainty is actually getting the issue, as we all know. So this is actually a challenge for the small but open economies like Mongolia, right? And so in order to access better funding is really the key challenge. And that's why in this regard, our multilaterals need to focus on it this moment to support the budget supports, and also funding the private sector is really important. And well, as for the Mongolia, we actually have established very grand coalition government. As you know, the country is very great democracy, you know. But in order to bring the private sector to boost private sector activities, we actually have in this very stable government. At the same time, also introduce a new reform, for example, in infrastructure sector, like we have established the National Committee on Energy Reform. So as you know, we are very rich of the coal, but no one is funding coal-fired plant, right? But at the same time, my country is very rich of resource of green energy, the renewables, you know, it's big land. And we live on a high altitude, which means we have a very strong wind, at the same time also very bright sun, which gives a lot of potential. So far we have 2.6 terawatts resource of renewables. Potentially it's like 14 terawatts, while China has a 2 terawatts demand, and Japan and others, you know. So the point that I'd like to make here is that, yes, my country is also the country of energy. Would be happy to support, provide all clean energy to the region in Asia and Pacific, you know. It could be very cheap, but in order to do that, definitely very good funding structure is needed, and partnership with the multilaterals would be very important.
Thank you. So very quickly now, all my panelists, just 90 seconds. You have the president of the ADB here. So you've already touched on this, Prime Minister Eke of Tonga, but what do you want from the multilateral development banks, in particular the ADB? Just 90 seconds.
I think I need it from multilateral ADB in particular to have a specific target sort of development strategy for us. which actually address the problem of high cost of capital and also development of the market, like, for example, bond market, which provide a cheaper mean of debt of financing. But also, I think, thank the introductions this year, the local currency debt financing, bond financing. In fact, this is the final year of the Pacific approach, the final year, and actually we think finally we have it this year, that kind of financing, and also final direct capital financing for small and also medium-sized businesses for women. I think this, and also the other one, I think we need to look into how we could provide equity financing. And I think those things, I think the ADB, in fact, I'm happy the ADB is going to provide a very targeted and differentiated strategy for the Pacific. And I think I'm looking forward for that. I think not only to implementation, but I think scale up, accelerate the system that come to us in order to able to overcome the challenges for developing a resilient economy.
Thank you very much indeed, and very good point about the SMEs. When we talk about the private sector, it all varies. Very quickly again, just a minute, Governor Monticelli, you talked about social investments, how you are the only bank that focuses only on social investments. How does that enable private sector development?
Well,
Quickly.
in,
Not a lecture.
Yeah, well, but I mean, I think that I made a pitch on productivity already. The point that I want to make, though, is that, alas, the cooperation in co-financing between the private sector and MDBs in the social sector is small. It's too small. It's less than 1%. And more has to be done to increase it. How? Just thinking better the projects in a way that they can have a monetary return and not only a social one on the part of the MDBs in helping the project promoters, and on the part of the private sector, understanding that the social investment traditionally offers less variability and risk than other type of investment. 1 second just to mention that MDBs also contribute as a system and cooperated with the private sector with the liability side for their balance sheet, issuing social inclusion bonds and green bonds.
All right, well, there you are, President Calvino. So systems, MDBs working together as a system. How are you going to foster greater synergies between EIB and the ADB?
Well, I mean, since I took over at the helm of the EIB, I've been really putting this top of the priorities, that we cooperate better as a system. I'm not a new kid on the block, actually have been here around for a long time and have been for many years convinced that this was one of the great assets of the world. And so we have a long, I think we come out of this panel with a lot of homework, but luckily it coincides with our work streams. So I think that we will be delivering surely improvements in all these areas you have mentioned. Let me just say 2 final things. One is to thank the Prime Minister for mentioning women. Investing in women is investing in strong communities, strong societies, stable countries, and more peaceful world. So I think it's worth mentioning this. And the second message is just to say how important data are. So this GEMS initiative that we have mentioned, which is bringing together the wealth of data we have from the multilateral institutions on our credit for the last 40 years, reaches to very interesting conclusions. The likelihood of countries to default is lower, and the likelihood of investors to take losses is lower than we would have expected when we look at the data. So I think that developing these tools is also going to be extremely important for countries to be able to attract investors that will be lucid about the actual risks that they will be taking. And then the multilaterals, we will need to be there to de-risk the investments, to accompany them. But starting with the right data, I think is a good place to start. And let me close with a question for all of us. It's a provocative question. Should we not revise the definition of development assistance? If we're going to focus on the private sector, maybe we have to look again at the definition of what we consider to be official development assistance and be more mindful of being inclusive of these very important levels.
And maybe lose the word assistance and see it more as a partnership or collaboration.
Absolutely.
I think it's a very old-fashioned word, isn't it? You're right, assistance.
Absolutely.
And Deputy Prime Minister Dorchan, so your final pitch, what do you want from the MDBs and the ADB in particular to help you foster private sector development in Mongolia? Just a minute or so.
Yeah, well, I'm actually very much welcoming this trust fund initiated by the Japanese government. And also the policy of the ADB is changing to support more private sector, which is very good. So today, actually, after this meeting, we are going to discuss about $1 billion private sector funding from the EIB to the energy sector. And what we are actually looking forward is, we don't need the money for the government, but we need the money for the private sector. And that's what we are doing, for example. As for the renewable sectors, all this renewable will be done by the private sector. There will be no the government involvement. We will be providing a very nice PPA, that's it, and then also access into the fund. This is actually a clear policy that we are taking in place. But at the same time, what we're actually looking forward from the multilaterals is basically, yes, please increase the size of the funding to the private sector. And this is actually quite an important momentum that the funding is getting, again, very expensive.
Yeah.
And multilaterals need to play a very good role, and we need to get together. Because every region is getting together, you know, and we have to work together. And also, I would like to thank also the EIB and others, even though we are not a part of the Europe, but still you're working very closely with us, funding this demand of the infrastructure, you know, which is very key to support the private sector investment.
Of course.
Thank you.
Of course, the cost of capital, you've made that point very well. President Kanda, final word to you. So what's your vision for the Asian Development Bank when you're approaching the design of your role as a partner, you know, in the region when it comes to shaping markets and fostering private sector?
Thank you. Yeah, actually, facilitated by you, Zainab, you know, your remarks are very much insightful, informing our new private sector development approaches. And, you know, all of you are talking about the financial assistance scale, and we indeed, you know, increase by fourfold to 13 billion annual commitment to the private sector, which is very much ambitious. And also, we will introduce a more innovative way, including the cutting-edge financial innovation. But most importantly, my approach is to understand the constraints to private sector development and investment on the ground, and then to address them in the country-specific, tailored manner. So ADB's finance knowledge and partnership are implemented with clear intention by first aligning with national development priorities of yours and grounding the direction in market analysis and diagnostics and identifying specific constraints, not just the abstract manner, but, you know, directly addressing these constraints and designing ADB projects for maximum impact. And as I mentioned, there will intervene the all, you know, part of the spectrum from the upstream, midstream, and downstream. For instance, for upstream, of course, you know, we are developing the policy-based lending in many countries. And midstream, for instance, the adversary opportunities will deliver for impact, like PPP interventions. And of course, the downstream, we have many good examples, like in the case of the monsoon wind project in the Lao PDR. So we are very much excited to increase our contribution to PSD, and, you know, as your country suggested to the funded, the AMAP will be one of the very strong instruments to assist you. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much indeed, President Kanda, and that's all we have time for. So not only mobilizing private capital, but also providing the enabling environment so that the capital can flourish independently of the MDBs and the idea. Thank you to all my panel. Thank you to you for your time. I've enjoyed and learnt tremendously from it. I hope you have too. From me, Zain Abadawi, thank you and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Right on time. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.